Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thueringer. At least that's how I suppose the map is pronounced. It's a German map spelled Thueringer. Thueringer. At least that's, when I put it in an online translator, that is what the German voice says in terms of how it's pronounced. And it's a new series I'm going to try on Farming Simulator 15. I downloaded this map from ModHoster. Looks like it was one of their maps that was selected. Actually, a number of them, just stellar maps that a lot of people liked, and they had a special designation for them on ModHoster. So I'm going to give this one a try. I believe it's a 4X map, so there should be plenty here for us to do. And I've already made a couple tweaks to the map. One of the first things I did was remove most of the fields that we own just to add some additional challenges. Took it down to 3 fields, and as you can see, I'm starting right here in with the harvest. And I probably should have fertilized the field. I wasn't thinking. So I'm probably not going to get the best yield as I started. But really, my purpose for this particular series isn't even so much about the farming, although I fully intend to enjoy the map. It's rather for something different that I wanted to try with these videos. And again, one of the purposes that I've always had for doing YouTube isn't even so much to put something out there to gain an audience or anything. I mean, you'll never hear me asking you to like my videos, subscribe, or any of that kind of thing. I mean, you do whatever you want. One of my motivations for doing this, as you listen and you hear my voice, I don't have a very good voice. I have a voice disorder. And a big part of what I'm doing is just simply trying to exercise it, to use it, and so I've created a lot of these silly videos enjoying a pastime called Farming Simulator. And so here I'm going to try something a little bit different from what I've been doing, which is either telling a lighthearted story, talking about modding, or just shooting the breeze, chewing the fat, as my good friend, the late Eustace Farmer, would say. Well, on this one here, what I want to try doing is reading. And I know a person has to be careful when you read something and broadcast it. There's copyright laws and what have you. So in this one here, I'm going to be playing in the background while reading a very old book. And I'll get to the ad in a moment, but maybe just a little bit more on this particular map. I certainly don't want to shortchange, showing who the author is and all that. And you'll notice I'm just looking around in game. I'm curious. I want to see kind of what's going on in here, see the equipment. You'll see me opening doors and a whole bunch of, just exploring, which I would do on any new map. But like I say, the map is called Thueringer, and I believe, let me see if I can pull up the XML for it. It was created by, there's 3 authors that I can see, and I have no idea how to pronounce it. The first looks like El Ulem, EL_ULEM. The second author, Completumba, Komplettumbau, and Landei 68, Landei 68. And of course, anybody that has ever seen a map knows it isn't just the map author, it is undergirded by anybody and everybody who has made objects to support the map. And it's German. And so this is unfamiliar to me. I don't know German. The style in here is different from what I'm used to. So there's a lot of things here I'm going to be getting used to as farming this map. The description for it, which I'll read before getting to the book, goes like so. We are at the edge of the Thueringer forest, in near the town of Bad Lobenstein in 1988. Some of this may be coming from Google Translate, by the way, as I think on this. This is my private map. I rebuilt Comlet, I don't know what that means, according to my ideas and errors of the original map have been expanded, eliminated with buildings, for example, from the Bantikau map, and many functions can be produced. Flour, sugar, bran, cherry, plum, lettuce, tomato pallets, diesel, seeds, fertilizers, beer, dairy products, washed or steamed potatoes, fodder, lime. Water bodies are public property. In other words, water is free for forest workers waiting on 12,000 precipitable trees. Again, it appears, just like I would do making a mod, you do the best you can to translate it into another language, and it never fully goes if you don't know the other tongue you're trying to translate it into. So I think we get a little picture of what's going on here, even though it isn't translated in perfect English. The landscape is dominated by the agriculture of, I don't know what that means, DDR. The fields are between 0.9 hectares and 18.3 hectares large, and largely correspond to the original. That must be the original version of the map. E's, I don't know what that means, are to provide more farms pups you get in the breeding station in industrial, there's a name of a place, goes in the slaughterhouse or at the butcher. Because there was no BGA in, there's a town, OSTZE, Ostseiten. I'm sure I'm butchering this. A test sample on the map, gives another name. Wow, this is not really English I'm reading here, even though it's in the English section. Something about secret passages on the farm. Boy, I can't, this doesn't make any sense to me in English. I'll just forego reading some of that. Stations in the yard, BGH, EPG, can be replenished with self-produced diesel. Okay, so we can make our own fuel. All purchasable fields are fallow land, meadows, and oh goodness. Yeah, this doesn't translate. Okay, you know what? We're done. There's a workshop for major repairs. They tried. It doesn't quite work in English. I give them credit for attempting to translate it, but I can't really decipher everything that it's trying to say in here. There's a whole bunch of German mixed in, and it just doesn't make sense to me. But that's all right. It doesn't have to make sense in order for us to enjoy the farming in here. So, in terms of reading a book, starting in this episode and in subsequent episodes, that's literally all it's going to be. I'm going to title the series Let's Read. So many times you'll see a Let's Play series, or role play or something, and I don't know that I've ever seen someone try a Let's Read. And yeah, I have a terrible voice. You don't have to listen if you don't want to, but I'm going to farm, and what I'm doing right now is a voiceover. I've already recorded the video, so I'm coming in behind here to record the sound, and or rather the audio portion of what I'll be doing. And so the book is farming related. I read it when I was a kid from a fairly well-known author, at least here in the U.S., by the name of Zane. And this particular book is now freeware. That's why I say you got to be careful with copyrights. I'm not sure how many years it is. Maybe it's 90 years 45 years, maybe is the first copyright. I may have the numbers wrong. And then you can renew it for another period. And this book here by Zane Grey is called The Desert of Wheat. And it was written in 1919. I remember reading it when I was a teenager, somewhere back then. And at some point and later, I read it again. And as typically happens, when you get older and have more perspective, books become more meaningful, even though you may have read it when you were younger. The setting of the book is actually, it isn't exactly near where I live. I live in Oregon's Willamette Valley, where there's a lot of agriculture here, and there's a lot of wheat grown here too, but it isn't a desert. And this region, I believe, that we're going to read about is more in southeast Washington. Maybe the book will say as to where it's located. But it was a very interesting story, and I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if I'm going to finish the series. I just wanted to give it a try. I got the whole book printed. I found it here on what's something called Project Gutenberg, where it has old books, where the copyrights have expired. So I'll try to put a link to it in the description so that if anybody wants to read it on their own, they can. I'm pretty sure I have a copy of it somewhere on my bookshelf, but I chose to print it to paper. And I'm seeing here, I think, put it to too small a print. I put 2 pages on a single sheet. So this is going to be interesting. Anyway, without further ado, let me try to dive in and read this. Zane Grey, The Desert of Wheat. Chapter 1. Late in June, the vast southwestern desert of wheat. Oh, excuse me, I can't even read. Late in June, the vast northwestern desert of wheat began to take on a tinge of gold, lending an austere beauty to that endless, rolling, smooth world of treeless hills, where miles of fallow ground and miles of waving grain sloped up to the far separated homes of the heroic men who had conquered over sage and sand. These simple homes of farmers seemed lost on an immensity of soft gray and golden billows of land, insignificant dots here and there on distant hills, so far apart that nature only seemed accountable for those broad squares of alternate gold and brown extending on and on to the wavering horizon line. A lonely, hard, heroic country where flowers and fruit were not, nor birds and brooks, nor green pastures. Whirling strings of dust looped up over fallow ground. The short, dry wheat lay back from the wind. The haze in the distance was drab and smoky, heavy with substance. 1,000 hills laid bare to the sky, and half of every hill was wheat, and half was fallow ground. And all of them, with the shallow valleys between, seemed big and strange and isolated. The beauty of them was austere, as if the hand of man had been held back from making green his home site, as if the immensity of the task had left no time for youth and freshness. Long years were there in the round-hilled, many-furrowed gray old earth. And the wheat looked a century old. Here and there a straight, dusty road stretched from hill to hill, becoming a thin white line to disappear in the distance. The sun shone hot, the wind blew hard, and over the boundless undulating expanse hovered a shadow. There was neither hood of dust nor hue of gold. It was not physical, but lonely, waiting, prophetic, and weird. No wild desert of a wasteland, once the home of other races of man, and now gone to decay and death, could have shown so barren an acreage. Half of this wandering patchwork of squares was earth, brown and gray, curried and disked, and rolled and combed and harrowed, with not a tiny leaf of green in all the miles. The other half had only a faint golden promise of mellow harvest, and at long distance it seemed to shimmer and retreat under the hot sun. A singularly beautiful effect of harmony lay in the long, slowly rising slopes to the rounded hills, in the endless curving lines on all sides. The scene was heroic because of the labor of homey hands. It was sublime because not 100 harvests, nor 3 generations of toiling men could ever rob nature of its limitless space and scorching sun and sweeping dust, of its restless age-long creep back towards the desert that it had been. Here was grown the most bounteous, the richest and finest wheat in all the world. Strange and unfathomable that so much of the bread of man, the staff of life, the bread of man, the staff of life, the hope of civilization in this tragic year 1917, should come from a vast, treeless, waterless, dreary desert. This wonderful place was an immense valley of considerable altitude called the Columbia Basin, surrounded by the Cascade Mountains on the west, the Coeur d'Alene and Bitterroot Mountains on the east, the Okanazagan Range to the north, and the Blue Mountains to the south. The valley floor was basalt from the lava flows of volcanoes in ages past. The rainfall was slight, except in the foothills of the mountains. The Columbia River, making a prodigious and meandering curve, bordered on 3 sides what was known as the Bend Country. South of this vast area, across the range, began the fertile, many-watered region that extended on down into verdant Oregon. Among the desert hills of this Bend Country, near the center of the basin, where the best wheat was raised, lay widely separated little towns, the names of which gave evidence of a mixed population. It was, of course, an exceedingly prosperous country, a fact manifest in the substantial little towns, if not in the crude and unpretentious homes of the farmers. The acreage of farms ran from a section 640 acres up into the thousands. Upon a morning in early July, exactly 3 months after the United States had declared war upon Germany, a sturdy young farmer strode with darkly troubled face from the presence of his father. At the end of a stormy scene, he had promised his father that he would abandon his desire to enlist in the army. Kurt Dorn walked away from the gray old clapboard house out to the fence where he leaned on the gate. He could see for miles in every direction, and to the southward, away on a long yellow slope, rose a stream of dust from a motor car. "Must be Anderson coming to dun father," muttered young Dorn. This was the first day, he remembered, when the wealthy rancher of Ruxton was to look over old Chris Dom's wheat fields. Dorn owned $30,000 in interest for years. Dorn owed $30,000 in interest for years, mostly to Anderson. Kurt hated the debt and resented the visit, but he could not help, acknowledging that the rancher had been lenient and kind. Long since Kurt had sorrowfully realized that his father was illiterate, hard, grasping, and growing worse with the burden of years. "If we had rain now, or soon, that section of blue stem would square father," soliloquized young Dorn, as with keen eyes he surveyed a vast field of wheat, short, smooth, yellowing in the sun. but the cloudless sky, the haze of heat, rather betokened a continued drought. There were reasons indeed for Dorn to wear a dark and troubled face as he watched the motor car speed up along ahead of its stream of dust, pass on out of sight under the hill, and soon reappear to turn off the main road and come toward the house. It was a big, closed car covered with dust. The driver stopped it at the gate and got out. "Is this Chris Doran's farm?" he asked. "Yes," replied Gert, whereupon the door of the car opened and out stepped a short, broad man in a long linen coat. "Come out, Lenore, and shake off the dust," he said, and he assisted a young woman to step out. She also wore a long linen coat and a veil besides. The man removed his coat and threw it into the car. Then he took off his sombrero to beat the dust off of that. Phew! The Golden Valley never seen dust like this in a million years. I'm choking for water. And listen to the car, she's boiling. Then as he stepped toward Kurt, the rancher showed himself to be a well-preserved man of perhaps 55, of powerful form, beginning to sag in the broad shoulders, his face bronzed by long exposure to wind and sun. He had keen gray eyes, and their look was that of a man used to dealing with his kind, and well disposed toward them. "Hello, are you young Dorn?" he asked. "Yes, sir," replied Gert, stepping out. "I'm Anderson from Ruxton, come to see your dad. This is my girl, Lenore." Gert acknowledged the slight bow from the veiled young woman, and then, hesitating, he added, "Won't you come in?" "No, not yet. I'm choking for air and water." "Bring us a drink," replied Anderson. Gert hurried away to get a bucket and tin cup. As he drew water from the well, he was thinking rather vaguely that it was somewhat embarrassing, the fact of Mr. Anderson being accompanied by his daughter. Gert was afraid of his father, but then what did it matter? When he returned to the yard, he found the rancher sitting in the shade of one of the few apple trees, and the young lady was standing near, in the act of removing bonnet and veil. She had thrown the linen coat over the seat of an old wagon bed that lay near. "Good water is scarce here, but I'm glad we have some," said Gert. Then, as he set down the bucket and offered a brimming cupful to the girl, he saw her face, and his eyes met hers. He dropped the cup and stared. Then, hurriedly, with flushing face, he bent over to recover and refill it. "Excuse me, I'm clumsy," he managed to say. And as he handed the cup to her, he averted his gaze. For more than a year, the memory of this very girl had haunted him. He had seen her twice. The first time at the close of his 1 year of college at the University of California, and the second time on the street in Spokane. In a glance, he had recognized the strong, lithe figure, the sunny hair, the rare golden tint of her complexion, the blue eyes, warm and direct. And he had sustained a shock which momentarily confused him. "Good water, hey?" dissented Anderson after drinking a second cup. "Boy, that's wet, but it ain't water to drink. Come down in the foothills and I'll show you. My ranch is called Many Waters, and you can't keep your feet dry." "I wish we had some of it here," replied Kurt wistfully, and he waved a hand at the broad, swelling slopes. The warm breath that blew in from the wheatlands felt dry and smelled dry. "You're in for a dry spell?" inquired Anderson with interest that was keen, and kindly as well. "Father says so, and I fear it too, for he never makes a mistake in weather or crops. A hot, dry spell. This summer? Huh. Boy, do you know that wheat is the most important thing in the world today?" "You mean on account of the war?" replied Gert. "Yes, I know, but Father doesn't see that. All he sees is, if we have rain, we'll have bumper crops." That big field there would be a record at war prices, and he wouldn't be ruined. Ruined? Oh, he means I'd close on him. Say, what do you see in a big wheat yield if it rains? Mr. Anderson, I'd like to see our debt paid, but I'm thinking most of wheat for starving peoples. I've studied this wheat question. It's the biggest question in the war. Kurt had forgotten the girl and was unaware of her eyes steadily upon him. Anderson had roused to the interest of wheat and to a deeper study of the young man. Say, Dorn, how old are you? He asked. 24, and Kurt's my first name, was the reply. Will this farm fall to you? Yes, if my father does not lose it. Old Dorn won't lose it, never fear. He raises the best wheat in this section. But father never owned the land. We have had 3 bad years. If the wheat fails this summer, we lose the land, that's all. Are you an American? Queried Anderson, slowly as if treading on dangerous ground. I am, snapped Kurt. My mother was American. She's dead. Father is German. He's old. He's rabid since the president declared war. He'll never change. That's hell. What are you going to do if your country calls you? Go, replied Kurt with flashing eyes. I wanted to enlist. Father and I quarreled over the ad until I had to give in. He's hard. He's impossible. I'll wait for the draft and hope I'm called. Boy, it's that spirit Germany's roused, and the best I can say is God help her. Have you a brother? No, I'm all Father has. Well, it makes a tough place for him, and you too. Humor him, he's old. And when you're called, go and fight. You'll come back. If I only knew that, it wouldn't be so hard. Hard? It sure is hard. But it'll be the making of a great country. It'll weed out the riffraff. See here, Kurt, I'm going to give you a hunch. Have you had any dealings with the IWW? Yes, last harvest we had trouble, but nothing serious. When I was in Spokane last month, I heard a good deal. Strangers have approached us here too, mostly aliens. I have no use for them, but they always get my father's ear, and now, to tell the truth, I'm worried. Boy, you need to be, replied Anderson earnestly. We're all worried. I'm going to let you read over the laws of what that IWW organization. You're to keep mum now, mind you. I belong to the Chamber of Commerce in Spokane. Somebody got hold of these bylaws of this so-called labor union. We've had copies made, and every honest farmer in the Northwest is going to read 'em. But carrying one around is dangerous, I reckon, these days. Here. Anderson hesitated a moment, peered cautiously around, and then, slipping folded sheets of paper from his inside coat pocket, he evidently made ready to hand them to Kurt. Lenore, where's the driver? He asked. He's under the car, replied the girl. Kurt thrilled at the soft sound of her voice. It was something to have been haunted by a girl's face for a year, and then suddenly hear her voice. He's new to me, that driver, and I ain't trusting any new man these days, went on Anderson. Here now, Dorn, read that, and if you don't get red-headed. Without finishing his last muttered remark, he opened the sheets of manuscript and spread them out to the young man. Curiously, and with a little rush of excitement, Kurt began to read. The very first rule of the IWW aimed to abolish capital. Kurt read on with slowly growing amaze, consternation, and anger. When he had finished, his look without speech was a question Anderson hastened to answer. It's straight goods, he declared. Them's the sure enough rules of the At gang. We made certain before we acted. Now, how do they strike you? Why, that's no labor union, replied Kurt hotly. They're outlaws, thieves, blackmailers, pirates, I don't know what. Dorn, we're up against a bad outfit, and the Northwest will see hell this summer. There's trouble in Montana and Idaho. Strangers are drifting into Washington from all over. We must organize to meet them, to prevent them from getting a hold out here. It's a labor union, mostly aliens with dishonest and unscrupulous leaders, some of them Americans. They aim to take advantage of the war situation. In the newspapers, they rave about shorter hours, more pay, acknowledgement of the union. But any fool would see, if he read them laws I showed you, that this IWW is not straight. Mr. Anderson, what steps have you taken down in your country? Queried Kurt. So far, all I've done was to hire my hands for a year, give them high wages, and caution them when strangers come round to feed them and be civil and send them on. But we can't do that up here in the bend, said Dorn seriously. We need, say, 100,000 men in harvest time, and not 10,000 all the rest of the year. Sure you can't, but you'll have to organize something.